architecture in Houston has always had a freshness to it.
I would describe Houston's architecture as eclectic.
It's a very contemporary city.
We have examples from Mies van der Rohe and I.M. Pei and Philip Johnson.
Kevin Roach and Rafael Moneo.
It's this worldly, international, super-duper diverse, energetic place.
The downtown skyline itself is a landmark. It's just so beautiful.
What excites me about Houston's architecture is the kind of discovery of great buildings.
When people come to Houston, they're totally surprised.
Houston, seemingly rising like Oz out of the surrounding flat coastal plain, has been building itself for nearly 200 years. An ever-evolving work in progress, Houston's skyline today rivals any in the world. Over the years, many renowned architects have contributed their skills and fostered Houston's growth through their design of office buildings, hospitals, universities, and homes.
Houston moved from thinking of itself as a city that in the 19th century wanted to be a kind of regional leader to, in the 20th century, thinking of itself as a city that acted on a national or international stage.
But there have been periods when Houston was booming, when it was looked upon as really the place of the future of architecture. It was the most dynamic city in America.
When postmodern architecture came into its own during the late 1970s and 1980s, the Starchitect was born. Sought-after architects became the rock stars of the built environment as their names became part of the popular culture. One architect who made a lasting impression in Texas was New Yorker Philip Johnson.
There are a lot of iconic skyscrapers designed by Philip Johnson. There's Bank of America, there's the Pennzoil Place building. They've got really striking profiles, and you can see them from a distance.
Johnson was as important to Houston as Houston was to Johnson. His career would not have been the same without Houston and without Texas. And he designed this amazing number of high-rise buildings, starting with Pennzoil.
It's a building you'll see in all the architecture textbooks and even art history books.
Philip Johnson did an awesome job in designing that.
Pennzoil Place is one of the buildings that kind of put Houston on the map of world architecture in the 1970s. Pennzoil Place marked a real transition in Philip Johnson's architectural career.
Another highlight of the Houston skyline is the Bank of America building, also designed by Philip Johnson. It is positioned directly across the street from his already iconic Pennzoil Place.
The dilemma was, what do you do when you're building across the street from what is considered one of your greatest works?
Philip Johnson modeled the Bank of America building after 16th and 17th century gabled merchant houses in Amsterdam and other Dutch cities.
This architectural model projected into the sky 56 stories was an appropriate historical reference for Houston as a kind of great trading city of the late 20th century.
The Humble Building was the tallest building west of the Mississippi when it was completed in 1963. Now known as the ExxonMobil Building, it changed Houston's landscape as architects began to design the ever taller structures that dominate the skyline today.
I remember as a little girl when it was the tallest building in Houston, and the thing to do was to go to the top floor on the observation deck and look over Houston. And there was a machine that you could put $1 in and get a little plastic version of the building.
The now-defunct Enron Corporation moved into its gleaming new 50-story office tower in the 1980s. The building and the company would go on to gain worldwide attention.
The Enron building is the sexiest building in Houston. It's an oval shape, and it was sited sort of at a diagonal to the grid so that when you come at it from any street, you see that wonderful curve.
It's the one that Arthur Drexler, who was then the curator of architecture in the Museum of Modern Art, said, now that's one of the finest skyscrapers in America.
Enron was about to outgrow its office building when it commissioned Cesar Pelli to design a second office tower across the street.
So Pelley came along and did a kind of a twin to it with some twist. And then you begin to have this kind of dialogue between the two buildings. But the best part is the connection, that donut that brings those two buildings together along with the garage. What an experience of driving under it, much less going within it.
Houston's unique downtown skyline inspires as it reaches to the skies. The flat Texas landscape allows structures to be seen unobstructed from multiple angles and great distances.
It is a beautiful skyline, there's no doubt about it.
The city's identity is really wrapped around downtown, and I think the quality of the buildings that are down there that has made Houston notable among skylines around the world.
And when you look at them from the distance, each building sort of has their signature style.
I love seeing the downtown skyline in the late afternoon. I just think that's beautiful, and how all the different buildings work together.
The Texas Medical Center, known as Houston's second downtown, is the largest medical complex in the world.
One of my favorite buildings in Houston is Cesar Pelli's St. Luke's Medical Tower that has the aluminum spires that look like hypodermic needles. And I just get such a kick out of that. I can see it from my backyard and from my office window.
Not far from the medical center is the storied Astrodome, the first domed sports stadium in the world. When it opened in 1965, a covered, air-conditioned stadium was considered a revolutionary architectural and engineering feat.
And it's probably one of the landmark buildings of the 20th century in the United States. It's a building from the heroic age of Texan excess.
Well, I just remember as a kid, traveling to Houston to go to see baseball games, football games. When you would walk into the dome and you would walk up those ramps, it was really ascending into something that was very special and captured the imagination.
When friends come, they all want to see this eighth wonder of the world. But this eighth wonder of the world is now wondering what is going to happen to it.
It's an important building. It's a part of Houston's history.
Everybody associates it with the Astrodome, even though it hasn't been used for a long time.
The Menil Collection building, completed in 1987, was Renzo Piano's first commission in the United States.
The Menil Collection is regarded as one of the greatest works of art museum architecture in the 20th century.
I like the way the light interacts with the environment and with the different spaces. It's something that's really amazing to me.
I think one of the things that's really special about the Menil isn't exactly the buildings. The buildings are wonderful, but it's the way that the buildings relate to the kind of ordinary homes around it.
It is a marvelous place to visit. It has public dimensions to it. It's not just an individual structure. It's very generous.
It's an art museum building that awes and impresses people because it doesn't try to awe and impress them.
And there's always this feeling of discovery.
Probably our best contemporary building.
People come from all over the world to see the Menil.
Houston's downtown business district also became a major arts and cultural destination during the 1980s. As a result, more people wanted to live where they worked. This led to the reurbanization and revitalization of the downtown area.
This is where the performing arts venues are, the opera, the symphony, the alley, and so on. But people didn't live there, and hard to find a restaurant. Not much life after dark. It was in the 80s when that pattern changed.
People are finding opportunities to live close to where they work.
One example is the historic Humble Building on Main Street.
That's a really good example of an adaptive reuse of an historic building. It was, of course, a commercial office building, and now it's a wonderful hotel.
You can live and work in the same building, and all historic areas downtown, that's how they were created in the 1880s, and so we're really returning to some very old ideas.
Old Market Square is located in an historic Houston district that is undergoing revitalization.
In the 90s, there was a focus on downtown, and there was a mini boom of loft conversions and townhouse building that changed a derelict area into one of the fastest growing residential areas in Texas. And this was sort of spurred by the renovation of the Rice Hotel into residential living, and more recently, the establishment of Discovery Green Park.
Discovery Green is a wonderful project that signals the future for Houston. And what it has done is make a pedestrian-friendly focus around the convention center and the ballpark.
Discovery Green, a former parking lot, is located near the George R. Brown Convention Center, Minute Maid Park, and the historic Union Station. Alongside its modern, sleek skyscrapers, the City of Houston maintains a collection of architecturally significant historic structures that adds to the city's character. One classic building is Lovett Hall on the Rice University campus.
Lovett Hall was built in 1912. It's a rich and colorful Byzantine style of architecture that rose out of the barren prairie to become the heart of the Rice campus.
Another great landmark building for Houston is the Cullinan Hall in the Museum at the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston.
Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, the famed German architect who came to the U.S. during the 1930s, designed an addition to the Museum of Fine Arts Houston in 1974.
And this was the only museum that Mies van der Rohe designed in the United States.
The economy was booming during the 1920s with Houston's busy port and the discovery of oil nearby. Gulf Oil made a grand statement with the design of their office tower, and Big Oil began to impact the skyline.
The Gulf Building is a remarkable Art Deco skyscraper, and I think it stands with all the ones in New York and Chicago and other places because of its beautiful decorative detail.
It was the tallest skyscraper in Houston from 1929 to 1963.
That building attracts people when they're downtown just to walk through and look and enjoy the beauty of that architecture inside and outside. All that metal inside is, we're told, is Montana nickel.
There's stained glass mixed with a sort of an Art Deco metalwork. I think it's a beautiful building.
City Hall opened in 1939, featuring the popular Art Deco design of the era. Surrounded by a tree-shaded plaza and reflection pool, the building continues to house the main offices of city government.
City Hall is a beautiful example of Art Deco, and it's been lovingly renovated and well cared for.
It's a great building, a great landmark for the city.
Across the street from City Hall is the historic Julia Idason Building, a part of the Houston Public Library that dates back to the 1920s. The beautiful Spanish-style building has recently undergone a complete restoration.
The Julia Idason Library is a gracious, gorgeous building on the outside, but when you walk inside, you get an even stronger sense of the design.
It was designed by Ralph Adams Cram, who was brought here to do Rice University.
Geographically, the East Texas Piney Woods, the Central Texas Prairie, and the Coastal Plain all converge at Buffalo Bayou, leading to the unique character of Houston's landscape.
I found that to be one of the most surprising things when I came here, to encounter a city that was really taken over by landscape.
Another feature of the city is its tree canopy, which relates to how buildings interact with the surrounding environment.
The tree canopy, the bayous, the fact that it seems like anything grows here. It's a luscious city, and I think that that's something that's quite unique to Houston.
Houston is such an open, palette for creativity. It's allowed for architects to be very responsible to the environment, yet meet the needs of the citizens of Houston.
Architects design more than big-ticket office buildings and sports arenas. Homes, places of worship, and neighborhoods are also a major part of their work.
We had some great architects here in the 20s and 30s, neoclassical architects like John Staub.
John Staub was one of the greatest architects to practice in Houston. He was an architect who based the design of his houses on historical models.
John Staub was commissioned to design one of the finest homes in Texas, Bayou Bend. It was built in 1925 by Houston philanthropist Ima Hogg and her brothers. The new visitor center, a contemporary metal-clad structure, sits in distinct contrast to Bayou Bend's original 1925 home.
It captures a spirit of Houston from when it was built and the time when she lived there. The collection itself in the house is world class.
Sam Houston Park on the western edge of downtown features beautifully preserved historic Houston homes that are open to the public.
I think Houston is very fortunate to have such an easily accessible example of our built history right in downtown Houston. Our earliest structure is 1823 Old Place. The framing of the whole house is done without nails. So it's brace frame construction, it's mortise and tenon jointure, it's all wood. They constructed in 1823 before Houston was even a city. Sam Houston Park shows us where our earliest settlers came from and what they were capable of and the techniques that brought us to where we are today.
Rothko Chapel, a non-denominational space designed for Dominique and Jean de Menil, was built to house the commissioned works of American abstract expressionist painter Mark Rothko.
The Rothko Chapel, I think, is one of the 5 landmark buildings of Houston. It was a space that was to be a spiritual space. And it often strikes me as the kind of quiet center around which the maelstrom of Houston revolves.
I think that the most successful projects in architecture are projects that through their form and through their programming offer something to the public realm.
Project Row Houses provides exhibition and residential spaces for working artists in Houston's 3rd Ward. It started in 1993 with 9 low-income houses and has grown to 40 properties. In the 1990s, a group of innovative Houston architects produced what humorously came to be called the Tin Houses.
These young architects built houses for clients in the West End. These were houses that were very different from the kind of one-story wooden cottages that were there.
That doesn't exist anywhere else that I'm aware of. The material was sort of dismissed as being materials from shacks. But here it's used in a very sophisticated way.
I mean, we have some very eclectic architecture, some very odd things like the beer can house and the orange show, and it's another unpretentious way to look at architecture.
I think the city has all the pieces, and it kind of likes its messiness.
Houston is the largest city in America with no formal zoning, and the lack of zoning, combined with other factors including the climate, have impacted Houston's development unlike anywhere else in America.
It's a famously sprawled city, but in fact, the major core of what goes on in Houston is within the loop, and what sprawls out is primarily residential.
You know, this is the American city per excellence in the sense of consuming, expanding possibilities. And that doesn't mean that they are just without limits. And this is, for me, the great challenge about Houston.
The city has a strong community of local architects, many of whom attended one of the area's 3 schools of architecture.
We like to say the city is our laboratory. All of the projects that we do find their root in the city. We try to engage the city when we can.
I'm currently working on a multi-level art performance center that could actually potentially be right near downtown. I'm really involved with music, and I know that for me, architecture is the closest thing to music and being able to completely create an experience for someone.
And architecture is one of the arts, there's no question about it. And I think architects consider themselves artists.
They practice the art of architecture, which is the art of making spaces that nurture those that occupy those spaces, that make them see things that they never seen before. I believe that in that sense, art and architecture are quite similar.
Architecture is definitely art. Art is an expression, a human expression on how we interact with different elements. And so that is definitely displayed through architecture, how it interacts with the environment, how it interacts with the people that will utilize and use that space.
People respond to spaces that are meaningful in some way.
I think there's a lot of investment in making Houston a beautiful city, and a lot of people really want to have good design here.
In 1986, Sesquicentennial Park opened along Buffalo Bayou near the Theater District. The new Houston Ballet Center for Dance, which attracts top dancers from around the world, faces Buffalo Bayou.
Oh, I think the Ballet Center is a really wonderful building, and it was a very close collaboration between the ballet company and the designers of the building. It's almost as if the architecture is very secondary to what the building is for and what goes inside, and to me that's the excitement about that building. And then also it's an opportunity now for the ballet to be one of the most visible arts organizations in Houston.
Houston's a very diverse city, and architecture is also very diverse. There's a lot of hidden places in our city that you can find just around the corner.
Asia Society Texas Center's new building, designed by Japanese architect Yoshio Taniguchi, is one of only 3 Asia Society buildings in the world. The building represents Houston's growing diversity and its continuing commitment to bringing outstanding architecture to the city.
I think that is going to be an iconic place and an iconic building in Houston. Spectacular, absolutely spectacular.
BG Group Place, one of the newest additions to Houston's skyline, features a cutaway notch sky garden on the 39th floor. The dramatic building is one of the first LEED certified platinum green buildings in the world.
Houston is becoming a leader in sort of a green, sustainable future.
I think we've got one of the best new skyscrapers in America by John Pickard. And just going in the lobby of that place makes you go, wow.
Like many downtown Houston office buildings, BG Group Place is connected to Houston's underground tunnel system. BG's entrance to the tunnel features architectural details of the original structure on the site. Houston's stunning architecture reflects the brash and forward-thinking dreamers who shaped and continue to shape the city's image and history. Increasingly diverse and global, Houston has always been a welcoming place for new ideas. Its architecture sets the tone for residents and visitors alike to explore and appreciate the built environment that is all around, from downtown to the surrounding neighborhoods.
The best of Houston architecture has had this kind of amazing, often surprising sense of innovation.
I think that Houston offers a sort of open frontier, you could say.
It's always looking outward.
I don't think that by looking at Houston on a map or seeing a picture of Houston, you can really understand how great the architecture actually is. It's something that you have to come and see.
This is a huge city. There's also a huge amount of opportunity.
Other people come and they want to see the Pennsylvania, they want to see the Galleria, they want to see Rice University, the Menil.
The skyline starts and never ends because it's almost a 360-degree turn.
Is if you have an architectural style or a design type that has been built anywhere in the world, it's represented here in Houston.
And you can see why Renzo Piano, Philip Johnson, people of this great stature have come to the city.
Somebody said to me one time that Houston has the height and the energy of a teenager. I can do it all. I can have everything I want sort of attitude. And that's really good.